I spend about 1 hour per month on bookkeeping for my entire real estate portfolio. That's it. And I can pull any report, answer any question, and sleep easy at tax time. How does that happen? These four systems that I'm about to show you. I'm not a professional accountant or a finance major, so if I can do it, you can too. So let's break it down. If we haven't met yet, my name is Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach Carson. And on this channel, I teach you how to use real estate investing to achieve financial freedom so you can spend your time doing more of what matters. And this is a Coach's Corner edition of the podcast, which just means I'm a little bit more informal. And I just like to have a chat with you about something that's been on my mind. And this topic in particular is one that I taught to my private community, Rental Property Mastery, recently and had really good feedback. And so I wanted to share it with you to let you know how it works as well. So before we get to the four systems, I want to start off by talking about why bookkeeping. Because a lot of people think this is just one of those boring topics, something you have to do after hours, and it's not really one of the most important things in your business. I would argue, though, that bookkeeping is extremely valuable. And I use the story of The Matrix, one of my favorite movies. And Neo, as you see here, became the superhero of The Matrix because he slowed down time. He was in this computer program and he learned how to slow things down. And he saw the entire Matrix as a series of zeros and ones. And because of that, he could stop bullets. He could jump through over cars and do all sorts of stuff. Well, I find bookkeeping to be sort of a similar superpower in real estate investing and small business because if you know your numbers, if you have a really organized business, everything slows down. You can see your entire business, all the transactions, all the future things that are going to happen. You can start seeing trends in numbers. And because of that, you can be a superhero of real estate investing. So don't think that this is something boring that you just have to do. Think about this and what kind of power it's going to give you in your business. So with that said, here are the four systems of my own bookkeeping system and my real estate investing business. I'll go over them real quickly, and then I'm going to dig into each one in more detail. So number one is a system called your books, or it used to be called more your ledger. This is where you record every transaction that happens in your business. So you have to have a computer, or it used to be a paper version of all these transactions. And typically you keep this in like a spreadsheet or a software. I'll talk about some of the softwares that you might be able to use as a real estate investor. I personally use QuickBooks in my real estate investing business, but you can use whatever works for you. But the main point is you have to have a record. You have to have a digital record of everything that's happening in your business. And I'll talk a little bit more detail about that. But then number two, you have a parallel system, which is record keeping, or you could think about it as like saving all your receipts, paperwork, things that are proof of all those transactions you have. So I say in parallel, these two things work together because if the books are your recording of all the transactions, your record keeping is the proof that those things actually happen. So especially if you get audited by the IRS or some other organization, you need to make sure you have proof. And so I'm going to talk about where you can store these files, how you make it so it's not so cumbersome, and what software I use as well. And then number three is having a system of checklists. So this is really just about being organized and what are the kinds of things you need to do every month? What kind of bookkeeping tasks are there? And just making that easy because this isn't the first thing that makes you money in your business. You don't want to have to spend a bunch of time remembering or forgetting what's going on. So checklists are really important to use. And then number four, this is really the payoff of the first three steps, is that once you have all that organized and you have a system set up and you're doing it regularly with checklists, then you can actually get data that helps you run your business, helps you think ahead of time, helps you learn from past mistakes and things that have gone well. And this is a series of spreadsheets and reports. So this is like the output of your bookkeeping system so that you can do things like KPIs, which are key performance indicators, portfolio performance reports, et cetera. And I'll go into each one of those in a little bit more detail. So let's start off by unpacking the first system, your books and your ledger. And I'm going to give you two different versions of this. I'm going to give you a basic setup that some of you who are just getting started or you just want to keep things really simple and low cost, you can do it this way. And I'm also going to share with you using software. And I use QuickBooks in particular, but there's other software you can use as well. I'm going to show you both of those systems. And I actually use both of these. This basic one I'm about to share with you, my wife and I have a property that we self-manage on our own. It used to be our residence. And we use this basic system every year to do all that private rental property that we have. And then we use the more advanced system to do our rental property business. So let me explain what the basic one is. It basically has two parts for us. We have number one, just a separate business bank account. And I know this sounds kind of basic, but remember, you don't want to mix your business, your real estate investing business, with your personal finances. You don't want to have one bank account that you're paying for separate things in. you want to have a separate bank account. Number one, it just keeps things simple. But also, if you ever get audited and you want to prove that you have expenses that were actually business expenses that are deductible, you need to treat it like a business. You need to have it separate. And it's so easy to have a separate bank account. I think I use Capital One as my business bank account. It's online. It's easy to do. And you could do something where you have like an account per property, like Capital One and some other banks like that online are easy to set up, like 1, 2, 3, 4 bank accounts. And so you could have like a separate checkbook or separate payment source on Venmo or something whenever you're paying expenses for each of your properties. And that would make it really easy to track all the transactions for each of those properties. So that's one idea, especially if you're pretty small. And then you could also have maybe a credit card or a debit card per property. That way, every time you spend money on that credit card or from that bank account, then it's coming from that property. So that's just one idea. Like I only have one bank account just to kind of keep things simple there. But those are some ways you want to start with your bank accounts. That could be like the basic foundation of making sure you're organized with your bookkeeping. The second thing is having some sort of spreadsheet. So you can use Google Sheets. That's what I use to basically track all of the transactions that happen. So you're going to spend money. You're going to send $500 to a contractor to do some kind of repair. You're going to pay your property taxes every year. You're going to receive rent on your rental property. Those are called transactions, and you want to record those somewhere. And what I do is use a Google Sheet to do that. So I download from my bank account a spreadsheet, and then I can organize those. And I organize them into a spreadsheet that has a few different tabs. And I do this at the end of the year for my rental property. I just spend 2 hours literally and just organize all that. And I kind of label the different transactions. This was rent. This was a property tax expense. This was insurance. And then I create a little report, a profit and loss report from all those transactions. So if you actually want to get a copy of that for free, I will give that to you. You can just look in the link in the podcast, the YouTube description below. And you'll have free bookkeeping downloads, and you can check that out and get it. I also have a copy of something I'm going to talk about here in a minute, my QuickBooks chart of accounts, how I organize all my rental property QuickBooks. So if you want to get both of those for free, just download it and you can check that out. But just one more comment about this. Keeping this simple online is sufficient for a lot of you. Like if you just have a very small rental business, you don't have a lot of transactions, then this can work. But if you start getting a little bit bigger, or you plan on getting a little bit bigger, and I would say over like 2 or 3 properties, then having another kind of system probably makes a little bit more sense with a little bit better software, something with a little bit more automation. So I want to talk about that next. So I think about this as sort of an upgrade to this first system. So your books and your ledgers with a spreadsheet works fine, but when you upgrade it, you're using some sort of software that saves you some time, and it keeps you more organized as you get bigger. I personally use QuickBooks. I've used it for 22 years now for my entire real estate investing business. It's worked well for me. I would love to see QuickBooks kind of advance even more. So QuickBooks, if you're listening to this, I think we can make some innovations in your software a little bit. And I think they've kind of locked in and got a little bit lazy with the software, but it works really well for a large variety of businesses, including real estate investing. I can do everything I need to do with QuickBooks. There's also other software out there. I have students in my community rental property mastery using TurboTenant who are happy with it. They have a bookkeeping kind of built into there. Some others use Stessa. There's some other ones out there like Quicken that another person in my community uses. So all of these, you kind of find the one that works for you, that meets your budget, that you like. There's a lot of good options out there, and there's probably going to be more and more good options. Here are the features that I think it needs to do though. Number one, it needs to auto import your transactions. So remember the bank accounts we had earlier? I have one bank account for all of my rental properties in my business. And so that one bank account, you can auto import it into your bookkeeping software so that you don't have to manually type all those things out. That's the first thing you want to do. Second thing is you want to be able to have some sort of memorization tool so that if it looks like this transaction looks like one from the past, like this looks like property taxes because you paid a certain, your local tax assessor or something like that, it recognizes that and then can memorize it, and then you don't have to like label that again, because there's a lot of manual work of labeling each of these transactions and categorizing them. So if you have some sort of memorization, some kind of smart tool with your bookkeeping, that helps out a lot. The other thing you have to do every month, just sort of from a practical standpoint, you reconcile your bank to your books. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth about that, but that basically means you want to make sure everything in your bookkeeping system matches up with what the bank says is the amount of money you have in there and at the end of the month. And so that's a really good check to make sure your bookkeeping system's organized and correct at the end of the month. I also put in purchase and sale transactions into this system. And then all the reports I'm going to talk about later, you can create from that as well. So this is a system of organizing all your transactions. That's the long and short of it. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want a copy of all the way I label all my transactions inside of bookkeeping, my bookkeeping system at QuickBooks, you can get a copy of my chart of accounts by downloading that link below. So that set of books is great, but it's not enough. You have a list of all your transactions, hopefully in your computer software and a spreadsheet, But you have this parallel system that I talked about that you also need to have. I call it record keeping. And this is basically just keeping up with all the paperwork, or hopefully it's all digital, as much digital as you can these days, and saving it somewhere and keeping it organized. And so this could be as simple as just having like Google Drive. I like to use Evernote. I use kind of a combination of Drive and Evernote for mine to save all my files. You could use Dropbox, you could use Apple Notes, whatever works for you. I would say go with a big company that is going to be around for a while, because you want to have these records and you want to make sure they're either backed up, there's some security behind them. But I like to keep things digital. I used to keep everything paper, and I try to keep everything as much as I can digital first. Some people like to keep parallel kind of mirror systems, and I use either my phone, like an app on my phone, so Evernote, or a Google Drive app, where if you have one piece of paper, you can scan it, bam, it's gone, throw the piece of paper away. That's one way to do it. If you have a big set of paperwork, like after a closing, or 30 insurance documents, how do you get all those? Doing that with your phone would be sort of cumbersome. One of my favorite pieces of technology is a simple little scanner, IX 1400. I'll have a link to it in the podcast and YouTube description below. I think it costs $300 or $400, but this thing takes like 30 pieces of paper and it scans it in 60 seconds. Unbelievable. Like, one of the little pleasures of life is scanning a bunch of paper, having it in your computer, and not having to take much time to do it. So that is how I get things into my record keeping. And then you choose your organization system. I don't get really crazy with labeling and all that. I'll try to title it. And so a lot of the times these software will title it for you. And then later, here's the test though, is the whole purpose of this record keeping system is something I call the 5-second rule. Is that if I'm on my phone across the world, I'm in Spain where I lived for a year, I want to be able to search for a document like a purchase and sale agreement or a HUD-1 settlement statement from a closing I had, in 5 seconds, be able to find it. That's when you know you have a good record keeping system. And for me, having everything digital, easy to find, and you can find it in 5 seconds on your phone is the way it should be today. Like, if you have to go to a file cabinet and find something and search for it, and you can't just get it really quickly, it's really not the purpose, for me at least, of having the record keeping system. And then if you ever do get audited, which would not be a fun thing to do, but then you'll have these records, you can get them organized. You can, along with your bookkeeping system, show here's all the receipts, here's the invoices, here's the purchase and sale agreement, everything you need to back up and document your bookkeeping system should be here in your record keeping system. Okay, so I've shared with you the first two systems, the books, or the records of all the transactions, and the record keeping, which is a proof of all those transactions. But there's a third system that's really important for me, which is a system of checklist. And I want to give you a quick pitch for why checklists are important. If you got on an airplane, you're walking by where the pilot's sitting there getting ready for the flight. If you did not see him or her having a checklist that they were following before they flew the airplane, I would be a little bit more nervous about getting on that airplane. Or let's say you go to have surgery and your surgeon doesn't have a checklist. By the way, some surgeons, even amazing ones, operate on the wrong arm or the wrong knee or do the wrong thing. That's been documented. So they know that they need to have checklists to make sure they do everything right and prepare for doing surgery. So if it's good enough for pilots, if it's good enough for surgeons, it's good enough for us as the humble real estate investors as well, right? And so checklists just mean every month, what do you do with your bookkeeping? Every week, what do you do? Every year, what do you do? And just put that into a checklist. And then, I use Google Docs and Google Sheets to keep most of my checklist. But in the businesses I have, I also like to use software. Like Asana is a free software you can use. That's some premium upgrades. Monday.com. These are basically project management software. And so kind of an upgrade from Google Docs and Google Spreadsheets is to take your just basic list and put them into Asana, and then you can have reminders. You can check it off the list. You can copy and paste it and do it for lots and lots of projects. For example, if you're buying a property, every single time you buy another property, you have the purchase checklist in Asana, and then you start over for that property and kind of assign things based on that. So that's kind of next level. But if you just want to keep it really basic, you can have a system of just spreadsheets, Google Docs. I'll show you an example of my monthly bookkeeping checklist. And there's a couple things. You can customize this and make it work for yourself, but I have it by date. So like by the 5th of the month, we need to upload all our bank, credit card, and property management statements to our Google Drive. And we have a bookkeeper who helps us out now. I've done books myself in the past. I hired a bookkeeper to help me kind of run our system, but I still have to upload all the bank statements just so they can use those. That takes me 2 or 3 minutes, but then they can use those statements to reconcile and enter all the transactions. If we're doing rent collections ourselves, which we don't do now because we have property managers, but if you're doing that, you would want to check to make sure everybody's paid by the 5th, for example. By the 10th, you want to enter your property management reports in QuickBooks. You want to make sure all your bank accounts and credit cards are reconciled by the 10th. So these are just lists of things. Every little tedious thing you do, put it on the checklist, figure out what date it's going to be on, and then you can improve it over time. But the main point is whether you're running the business yourself and you do everything yourself, or whether you eventually want to hand this off to somebody else, if you don't have a checklist, you don't really have a system. You're abdicating your responsibility. You're just telling that person, do whatever you think should be done, as opposed to having a checklist saying, here's how we do it in our rental business. And then you can do it better yourself, have higher quality, and you can make sure they do it in a quality way as well. That's what checklists are all about. That's one example. I have a monthly checklist, I have a yearly checklist, and I have a purchase and sale checklist, which includes a lot of bookkeeping tasks whenever you buy a property. I highly recommend you have those too. So now we've arrived at system number 4, and this is really the payoff of all the other work we've done in the other 3 systems. This is where you get to have spreadsheets and reports that tell you about your business. So remember I said that you're like Neo in the Matrix where you get to see your entire business as zeros and ones. I sort of think about my business in a series of reports. And depending on the information reports, which is the first type of reports I'm going to share with you, or you might have like performance reports, property performance reports, both of those tell you something so you can learn about what's going on in your business and you can make decisions, whether that's like quick decisions that you need to change something. Maybe you had a big expense and you need to dig in with your property manager to find out what that was all about and make it better. Or maybe you have like big strategic decisions about this property is not really performing like it should, and I need to change something. Maybe I need to sell it, refinance, do something different. Like that's what you learn from reports. And a lot of my YouTube channel that I share with you, I do a lot of like back of the envelope spreadsheets, or analysis, but I also share histories of my properties. It all comes from these reports on my properties because I have details, records for 22 years of what's going on. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what kinds of reports I like to have. I like to have an all properties spreadsheet, which basically has just a list of all my properties and then different columns for different pieces of information, like the amount of value each property has, the amount of debt we owe on that property, how much equity we have, what the rents are, cash flow, things like that. And so you can just have the basic information that's important to you about your properties all in one place. That's pretty nice to have. For years, I didn't have an insurance master spreadsheet, and now I do. I have by property, what insurance we have, what our deductible is, how much the premium is, how much coverage there is, and what types of coverage. It's really nice to have all that. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I had one time in my career where I didn't have insurance on a property for several months, and until I made the list, I didn't realize like, oh my gosh, I don't have insurance on this property. It could have been a disaster, right? If I didn't refinance it, I either owned the property free and clear or had a private loan. And so didn't have the bank, to call me and say, hey, we don't have insurance on the property. So really stupid on my part. But by having a simple spreadsheet that reminds me what kind of insurance we have is something you can check on regularly. Also having a spreadsheet for capital expenses as you spend money on replacing a heating and air on a property. It'd be nice to have a list of all those things, especially as you get bigger, you start forgetting the things you've done. And then having an annual portfolio performance. So what did I expect to make in cash flow? What did I actually make in cash flow? That's another spreadsheet I like to play around with. So all of those are informational spreadsheets, but I want to show you another category here of performance spreadsheets, and they're slightly different. I have one I call KPI. KPI, this is not what I call, this is a very common business practice to have key performance indicators tracked somewhere. And what does this mean? For me, this means having like the total rent that we collected for the month, not by each property. I just want to see like a quick snapshot, almost like a dashboard on an airplane that tells me the key things. I want to see if there's any red lights blinking saying this is a problem, something your negative cash flow in your business, or you only collected 80% of the rent you normally collect. Like that's basically what the key performance indicators tell me. You pick like 5 or 6 main numbers you want to know in your business, and you look at those really closely every single month. And it takes me 5 minutes literally to gather this information from my bookkeeping system. And I like to, if I don't do anything else, I look at the KPIs, and it tells me sort of as almost like a pulse on a patient. If you're a nurse, what's going on with the business. That's the KPIs. I also, at the end of the year, like to look at a profit and loss of the whole business, profit and loss by property. That's really important to look at because ultimately that's what you're trying to figure out if your business is making money. Related to that, like a portfolio performance spreadsheet. This is kind of like an annual checkup like you have on your body. You do a checkup on a little bit more granular than the profit and loss. You might look at the equity growth in your property, cash flow, which is not always the same as profit and loss. There's nuanced differences. Like when you pay down some equity on your property, that counts as a profit, but that is negative cash flow. Like you gave money to the bank and it reduced your principal on your loan by $500, but that's not money in your pocket. That's equity that's building up. So having a performance spreadsheet helps out. And then I also like to do these big deep dives every once in a while on each property and to see over time, how's this property doing? How's the cash flow growing over time, equity? And all this might sound overwhelming when you first start, but remember, if you have all this data in your bookkeeping system. It's just a matter of organizing it in different ways. And that's really what we're talking about here. I'm just giving you some ideas of different ways to organize your entire business so that you can know what's going on and you can make better decisions. And I mentioned earlier that all of this is something that I went through in my rental property mastery community. This whole presentation I'm giving you right now in even more depth is something I recently presented to rental property mastery. So if you were interested in getting even more depth, like I share all of my reports, share actually what's going on in my business. I have kind of this behind the scenes, coaches behind the scenes videos that I do on certain properties and what's going on with me, including a lot of my bookkeeping and reports and things like that. So if you're interested in getting even more than you're seeing in this video, consider joining Rental Property Mastery. We actually recently hit our cap of 300, but we have new spots open up every month as longtime members kind of phase out or hit their goals, things like that. We do have openings coming up every month. So if you're interested in getting a community of people who are small, mighty investors, get coaching from me. I do one-on-one coaching calls, and no, I don't outsource that to other people. This is me doing it every single week. And then also, as I mentioned here, the operating system, the checklist, the details, everything I have in my business. It's almost like a little mini franchise. You can just see anything I'm doing in my rental business. I'm an open book. I share it with you, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So that is Rental Property Mastery. You can go to coachcarson.com/mastery if you want to get in and find out what that's all about and apply to that. So I want to close with this whole idea of bookkeeping, the 4 systems. Remember that number 1, there's your ledger. Number 2, there's your record keeping system. Number 3, there is your checklist. And number 4, there's a set of reports. Those are the 4 systems. But I want to leave you with a coaching point here as your coach is choose one bookkeeping system. Like I gave you a lot of stuff here, but just choose one that you can implement in the next 30 days. And it could be really small. It could be, hey, I don't have a separate bank account for each of my properties, or I don't have a separate bank account for my real estate business at all. I need to get that. That would be one thing you can do to improve. Or maybe you're not using a spreadsheet, or you want to update the spreadsheet. That would be one system. Or maybe you're not saving the receipts somewhere and you want to do that a little bit better. So I'm going to go back to the 4 systems just to remind you what those are. These 4 systems: the books, the record keeping, checklist, info spreadsheets. Find one that you're going to do. And if you want to keep yourself even more accountable, leave me a comment below. Let me know which system you're going to work on improving. And I would love to hear from you. I'll read each one of those, give you a reply, give you a comment, encourage you a little bit. And I hope this helps you become a little bit more like Neo in the Matrix, a little bit more of a superhero for your own business. It's not something that ends tomorrow. You're going to always be improving your books over time. But I promise you, it's one of the best moves you can make in your real estate business. It's not as sexy as buying a property or refinancing it, but it's kind of like the foundation of everything else you're doing. And I think you'll be really happy if you start working on it. So let me know how it goes, what you're going to be working on. Love to hear from you. And if you're interested in rental property mastery or anything else from me, there'll be a link to that in the podcast and the YouTube description below. One more thing is we talked a lot about bookkeeping in this episode, but we didn't talk anything about taxes and how much you pay taxes on your rental properties. So I want to recommend my next video, which is how much tax I paid when I sold a rental property. It's a deep dive, including a spreadsheet that you can get for free about how much tax you pay when you sell a rental property, or if you're thinking about selling a rental property, how to figure that out and how to make sure you know what it's going to be ahead of time, because it can be a really big expense if you're not prepared for that. So check out that video. If you're watching on YouTube, you can click on the thumbnail above me here, or if you're listening on the podcast or watching on YouTube, you can click on the link in the podcast or the YouTube description below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.